In this film, we will be following Lily, a city girl who just got sent off with smiles from her family as she makes her way over to her new home in a small town called Newton. Fresh out of college, she wanted to make a scenery change in order to explore the world on her own. As she arrives at her new home, she gets acquainted with the next door neighbors, a sweet elderly couple that go by the Salvos. This couple tells Lily that should she have any issues in the neighborhood, she could always rely on the town sheriff. As the day goes on, and as she is finally acquainted with her home, Lily decides it's finally time to get some rest. A week passes. One night, Lily begins to hear ruffling coming outside her home as she lays in bed. She decides to ignore it, opening her window in order to get some fresh air as she falls asleep. The next morning, she awakens, feeling rather warm. When she gets up to open the window, Lily thinks to herself, "Weird, I thought I had it open last night." As the day passes and she's getting ready for bed, she noticed a red shimmer of light coming from her dresser. She abruptly gets up and dashes towards the dresser, where she spots a flashing red light. Curious and anxious, she opens up the dresser to find a secret hidden camera within her dresser. Disgusted, she pulls it out and rips it apart. She doesn't go to bed at all that night and lays awake in bed. The following morning, she urgently goes to the town's police department in search of help. Here, she meets with a stunning sheriff. After the sheriff and Lily get acquainted, the both of them together go to her home, where the sheriff begins searching her house. The sheriff comes back after a while of searching and tells Lily that she found the camera she was talking about and tells her he'll check it out for her. It seems like there was still a memory card on the camera. Lily thanks him and tells the sheriff she will probably be spending the night at a local inn. The sheriff recommends her a hotel, but as the sheriff leaves, Lily can't help but notice some wire coming out of the sheriff's pocket. Lily says nothing, but can't help but feel suspicious. This in turn leads Lily wanting to spend the night somewhere else, so she decides to sleep with the Salvos next door, who happily welcome her. As some time passes, Lily awakens from the sofa from the Salvos' home and hears a car pulling up nearby. She checks her wristwatch. The time says 2:13 a.m. She checks outside and sees the sheriff's car in her driveway. As she scans the scene from behind a curtain, she sees two men exit the sheriff's vehicle and make the way towards her front door. At this, Lily felt a chill go down her spine. One man is carrying a bag, and the other man is setting a set of keys? She watches as they manage to open her door. Doesn't make any sense. How could that be? She was sure that she had left the door locked. As the man who unlocks the door steps away, and the sheriff slowly makes his way inside, the lantern outside of Lily's door lights up his face, and Lily can indeed see that it was the sheriff, who was wearing a terrible grin. At this, Lily awakens the old lady, who then wakes her husband. As her neighbor's house lights up, it seems like the man with the sheriff who was keeping watch from the outside notices this, and he bursts off running in the opposite direction of Lily's home. With her neighbors kindly watching, Lily carefully walks towards her home, and she can see clearly the sheriff inside of her house. As she walks in, the sheriff turns and grins at Lily. She then hears the sounds of screams. She turns around quickly. She sees that the elderly lady's husband is fighting the sheriff's accomplice. It seems like he returned. The wife seems incapacitated as she's on the floor, as the husband clearly is fighting for his life. The sheriff then pulls out his firearm as she tries to turn to leave and points it at Lily. He smugly states, "Please, to your room. It'll be quite the night since you rudely interrupted my plans. You should have been at the hotel room." At this, Lily pushes past the sheriff and locks herself in her room in a state of panic. This is when she can hear the sheriff rushing to her room. He's pounding on the door. That is when Lily remembers She had a handgun her father had gifted her, and it was inside of her bedside drawer. She reaches the gun, and at the moment the sheriff breaks down the door, Lily points and shoots. It's empty. The magazine is in the drawer beside her. The sheriff smiles and walks towards Lily. At the moment that he reaches her and goes to grab her, the sheriff falls over. Behind him is the elderly man, battered and breathing heavily, holding the remaining pieces of Lily's mother's favorite vase. He smiles and collapses in the hallway. At this, Lily runs to her kitchen as fast as she possibly can. She grabs her phone and dials 911. In a frenzy of panic, Lily asks for help and quickly explains her situation. The phone operator worriedly tells Lily to calm down and that help is on the way. When Lily is about to answer another question, she feels a hot burst of air hit the back of her neck. She drops the phone and turns around, only to find a barrel of a gun pointed at her head, and behind it, the sheriff with a streak of blood flowing from the top of his skull. He says angrily, "I'm not going to have my reputation ruined because of a city girl and her grandparents." He places his finger over the trigger, and a loud bang goes off. At this, Lily screams, but quickly realizes she's not the one in any pain. It's the sheriff, who lets out a yell of his own and falls to the ground, releasing a set of keys he was holding in his hand. Lily quickly pockets them to turn in later, since this could have been the keys used to break into her home. She sees that the elderly man was holding her handgun from her room. It seems he was able to find the magazine and save Lily once again. Once again, the old man fell to the floor, exhausted. As the police slowly arrived, she watches as the sheriff and his accomplice are taken away, as well as the Salvos, who have been taken to the hospital for their injuries. It seems like after a quick checkup, Lily could be the one to be on her way, but her house was under investigation. Getting in her car to look for a place to sleep, Lily remembers that she had taken a set of keys from the sheriff. She takes them out of her pocket and notices that they're all labeled by numbers. She notices one that says, "Office." Desperate to find more information, she drives to the now empty police station and sneaks her way to the back, where she had first met him and, dare she say, his office. She unlocks the door and makes her way inside. There, she finds an open dresser full of keys and doorknobs? How peculiar, she thought to herself. She turns to see a dimly lit screen. Surprisingly, the computer was left unlocked. As she looked through the computer, she noticed that there were various .mov documents on the screen, all labeled with numbers. That's when it clicked in Lily's head. She took out the keys and found one with the same number on it. She clicked on it and was disgusted to see a video of a couple sleeping, unbeknownst to the camera recording them in their sleep. She then realized that, what if these numbers were all the house numbers in the town? Lily anxiously types in her house number, 232. A small pause, and then Lily felt the overwhelming urge to throw up and never come back into this office. On the screen were various videos of Lily changing and her sleeping. She could only imagine what the other numbers would contain. With this new evidence, she could surely be at ease and ensure that the sheriff would be locked up forever. Lily sends this newly found information to the town hall and to herself in order to ensure word gets out of what she found today, so that nobody has to feel uncomfortable in their own home again. Time skip 3 weeks later. Case adjourned. With the final details finished, the trial held for the sheriff was completed, and he was sentenced to life without parole. Lily was a key witness, and is watching from the stands as the sheriff gets escorted out of the hall. As the group of guards escorting the sheriff past Lily, the sheriff manages to whisper in her ear, "Do you think I was the only one watching?" And he walks towards the exit, being quickly removed. Lily feels terrified as to what the sheriff had just said. Is this really the end?